Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I am your host, Melody McAllister, and I love this book chat. I've been doing it for about 2 years, and I'm so grateful for everybody who tunes in the lives or watches the replay. You can find my book chat on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, and now on LinkedIn. And you can also see the replays on that as well. I want to give a special shout out to the Alice Keeler Teacher Tech and Rochelle Dene Potes Thrive in Edu Facebook communities who we are live streaming through tonight. I'd also like to give a shout out to the sponsor of our book chat, SpacesEDU. SpacesEDU is a digital portfolio and proficiency-based assessment platform built to showcase growth. If you will be at ISTE in a few weeks, come see us at booth 2157 and receive a gift in the shape of Jed. Oh my gosh. Okay. Stefanowicz. Did I say it right?
Perfect.
Oh, right. You are going to get Jed's book as a gift, Impact to Influence, Pathway Portraits of Risk Takers, Rule Breakers, and Changemakers. Tonight's chat is what I call a special edition. Not only do we have the author, Jed, we also have contributors to Impact to Influence with us, Dr. Khalees Warnham, Susan Koch, and Dr. Frank Rodneski. They will each make an appearance and talk about their contribution. But before we get to all of that, let me introduce author, educator, leader, Jed Stefanowicz. I was fortunate enough to meet Jed this past spring at an EdTech event. He is so kind, genuine, and strives for inclusivity. I respect him tremendously, and I'm so excited to have him at our Spaces EDU booth and host a book signing soon. So, Impact to Influence is sure to inspire you. And if you read it this summer, I have a feeling that it's going to help you start this new school year in a very positive way. So, Jed, how are you tonight? And can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It was great to meet you, and I like the way this kind of came together, almost a spontaneous idea that as we were talking, looking forward to ISTE. And thank you to Spaces EDU for making it possible as well. Yeah, a little bit about my background. I taught third grade for 20 years, starting back in the 1900s, of course. And then this is my sixth year as a digital learning coach. So, as a digital learning coach, my whole passion area is to partner with teachers and help bring their ideas to life. It's as simple as that. And it often is about innovation and technology, but it doesn't really have to be. That's kind of a big secret because everything that we're doing should feel innovative anyway. And it just happens to be that digital tools are a great way to do that. This is my second book. My first book was called Take Aim at Digital Learning, Activate, Innovate, Motivate. Activate content, innovate instruction, and motivate learners. And then this book, Impact to Influence, there's the lighting is better. This was really a passion project for me, and I won't tell too much up front, and we'll get to it. But it was a passion project for me because what I really wanted to do, and I realized after I completed it, was collect and connect all these individuals whom I admire and I've been inspired by. And that's what this project really was. And it, rather than just pull their stories and write about them, I had this idea, and it grew out of this an idea of being a guest on a podcast. And it was Dr. Chris Jones. I was on his podcast, Seeing to Lead, Support, Engage, and Empower, which is a great podcast. And it was great. It was the first podcast I'd ever been a guest on, and I really liked the experience, and I wanted to kind of rip it off. But the world does not need another podcast, especially from me. But what I did really like was the chance to just have a conversation, hear stories, and talk about kind of those really awesome conversations that we capture. So I wanted to capture the stories of these individuals who I called either risk takers, rule breakers, or change makers. So the structure of this book is you read 3, 4, 5 pages about an interesting one of these 20 interesting leaders, and then there's a QR code that goes to an interview. And everyone can talk about themselves on a Zoom call now. It wasn't a big ask to say, can you talk about yourself glowingly? But what I really wanted to do is really catch those stories and capture what it is that brought people. And if there's a volume 2, you're going to be in it because I want to
Oh my
hear,
gosh, thank you.
how did you, well, look at this, right? This is, we've all been educators of one sort or another. And what I wanted to really capture was people have taken steps further. And did they leave the classroom to do it? Did they do it by staying in the classroom? Did they have opportunities along the way? And interesting things I found were these kind of characters along the way, right? These almost like a hero's journey. So anyway, that's a little bit about me and the background of this book, but it really, like I said, became a selfish project because I was able to, like I said, collect and connect these individuals. And it's a really unique assortment of people that we have 3 joining us tonight who haven't met in person or virtually before. So like I said, it's a great way to put them together because they're all people I've learned a lot from, and I know that they can learn a lot and be inspired by each other. And then anyone who wants to read this book, I think will find these stories really fascinating.
Yes, I as a people connector, that's one of the coolest things about this and the special edition is that people are meeting for the first time. Except you already knew some, one of you have a really close relationship. We won't spoil that.
Yes.
But I as an ed tech educator who appreciates that, I really liked how you took the QR code and the interview. I really liked that. You don't see that a lot, in just regular books out there, but educators, I feel like we're just so creative that we're using technology and it's going to live forever. And I enjoyed the episodes with the different educators. And I think if you wanted to have a podcast, Jed, it would be okay. It's not just going to be one more dumb podcast. It would be a really great podcast because you ask good questions that we are going to ask. Yes. You talked a little bit about why you started this project. And so I usually have the author reading closer to the end, but because we're going to have some guests on, I was wondering if you could read like the introduction of Impact to Influence.
Sure. It's almost like doing an audiobook, just one page at a time. So this is a 1-page tease. But yes, the introduction. So the book is called Impact to Influence, and it's a drop with a ripple. It took me a while on Twitter to figure out why that drop was there, but then I got it. Oh. And the idea is it's a collection of pathway portraits. And what I meant by that is really telling those stories of really individualized pathways and these portraits of people who, and it's interesting if we get to ask our guests, do they consider themselves risk takers, rule breakers, or change makers? Because we're a modest bunch, for the most part, educators, right? So the introduction reads, this project highlights risk takers, rule breakers, and change makers who have found pathways to amplify their ideas and broaden their reach. They've moved from impacting a small number of students in classrooms to influencing many through teacher leadership, administration, educational policy, speaking and publishing, or even recognition as Teachers of the Year. Each section of the book will tell a brief story of an individual, followed by lessons to take away and a QR code to a one-on-one Zoom interview. Through the video interviews, I aim to ask and answer some big questions about each figured leader. Before starting this project, I needed to articulate my own definition of impact and influence before I could ask guests to do the same. In each interview, I attempted to capture the process from local impact to larger influence, with lessons learned along the way. You'll hear from nationally recognized teachers, award-winning authors, prolific podcasters, and even a YouTube bonsai sensation. So that if that's not a tease, I don't know what is.
Thank you. And I did drop the link, and I hope that you will get this book. If you're coming to ISTE, you can get this as a gift from SpacesEDU. So thank you for sharing the introduction and the reason that you started this project. And I love that it's a project. And I even love that you said there could be a volume 2, not just because you said you would invite me, but also because this is great. And the more people that we know and connect with, the more stories we have. And it really does make us better. And you put that, yes. And I love how you put that in this project. It's wonderful. Our first contributor that we're going to bring up is, I'm going to let you introduce her, Jed, because you know each other very well, but it's Dr. Khalees Warnham. Welcome, Dr. Khalees Warnham. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here tonight.
Thank you. Jed, tell us why you chose Dr. Khalees Warnham to be a part of your project and just anything that you really want to share.
But don't tell him I slipped you $20, Jed.
What? I would never. No, believe me, it's my pleasure to have you here. I'm sorry. There was music playing in another tab. I hope you didn't hear it, but there was a video queuing up. So, Khalees, so I had the pleasure of meeting Khalees this year through some professional development in our district. I'm a teacher in Walpole, Massachusetts. And our district, I would say, is in the early stages of doing some DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And Khalees was brought in as a PD specialist and an expert and consultant to do really important work, ask really important questions, and sometimes really uncomfortable questions. And you're going to find out she has a magic power to do that in a way that sometimes does not work well with others. And I think what I've heard in neighboring districts, and she may not know this, is that I think a lot of times Khalees is brought in after folks have had negative experiences. And it's really, like I said, there is a magic power to the way that she engages a room and can ask challenging questions with a smile and in a way that gets the room to smile too, but also acknowledge the truth and the hard truth and nothing but the truth. So, yeah, it's my pleasure that she said yes. And that's one of my questions I always want to ask is why'd you say yes? And then, but it's been great to get to connect with her this year and to connect other people through as well. I'm on our district equity task force, so we've gotten to connect in that context separate from this. But there was no question that she was my lead off for the book. So I'm gonna hand it over. I'll hand it back to you, Melody, to talking.
Yes, and did you find the little did you want to share the little overview of everybody? I didn't know we talked about that. Was that something you wanted to share?
Well, you know what I think I'll do, because the overview is all folks in the book. Let's go through each three of ours, and then we'll do the broad, the broad teaser for everyone, because I think especially, and you're going to hear Dr. Warnham's words in there, and you will feel exactly what her mojo is all about.
So that is curious. I'm curious now, Dr. Warnham, why did you say yes to this project?
Why on earth?
Well, for me, it was an easy yes, right? It was an absolute easy yes. I do think that, and really have to say thank you to Jed. I don't know I hope I have better manners and have said that to you before.
You have.
Thank you for the platform to be able to say that we have to have the conversation around race. We absolutely have to have it. And we can have it in a way that doesn't destroy us, but that lifts us all up. And the opportunity to have a authentic conversation was welcomed, right? So when Jed came a knocking, I came a running, because this is absolutely, I think, in my life, a have to. This is an absolute have to kind of conversation we have to have. And so
I love it.
Yes, it was an easy yes.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you said yes. And Jed, how important was it for you to have a diverse set of contributor stories and a diverse group of people in your book?
It was really important. Just like it's important to her work and it's important to her message, but it's important to my work too, because I wanted to reflect people I work with, people I care about, and the messages that need to be heard. So it's people who, like I said, whom I've admired and who have inspired me, and that naturally brings a diversity to the audience too.
I think that a lot of people strive for diversity, but they miss it a lot, and they just move on instead of waiting to get the diverse voices. They just move on because they feel like a timeline is more important. So I absolutely respect that you made sure that the people that contributed, the portraits that contributed, are diverse. And Dr. Warnham, I loved your interview. I love the spiritual part that you bring to it as well. And you said that if you would have got a tattoo and it was Girls Stand Up. Was that what it is?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you don't have to, because you have stood up. You are standing up. Your message is clear. Yes.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I do want to ask you, what would you classify yourself as, a risk taker, rule breaker, or change maker?
I really think the only way to answer that question for me is I'm a change maker who breaks rules and takes risks, right? Because the only way you can make change is to break a rule. The only way you can really make change is to take a risk. And my hope is that I have turned my pain into a product of service, right? That I have turned my pain into serving others. And that's what I think it's about. It's about, I think every change, any change, all change requires love and education. And if I can just love a little harder, and if I could study a little harder and be willing to share that, the rest will come, right? So it's not like I wake up in the morning and say, oh, I want to be a risk taker. That's not it for me. I wake up every morning wanting to love a little harder, serve a little more, and educate as much as I possibly can. But in order to educate, I have to first be educated. So I have to walk into life as a student, always listening, always wanting to know more, staying curious, wanting to have this conversation, and then love even those that don't welcome me at the table first, right? And that's why I really pride myself on being entertaining, but I'm an educator. I entertain because if I can entertain, if I can make you laugh, that's the lubrication you need in order for me to give you the education that we're trying to get across. So that's really my theme, how I would answer that.
I love that.
I'm not joking when I call it a magic power. I mean, there are fake magicians out there, and Dr. Frank Rudnesky and myself, we're both professional magicians. I don't know if you knew that.
We don't. I read your story. I did know that.
But it's not the same magic that Khalees has, because she does talk about that entertainment, but that educational entertainment as well. But I love that notion of having to be educated in order to bring that forward, right? And that's really what, for me, they're all journeys, they're all pathways, it's that, the impact, that's not just delivering the impact, it's what was impactful to you that I think turned it around to influencing and you talked about it in your interview as your call also.
Right. And something that you would have to be almost a magician, because you also strive for teachers to understand that it's not really about them. But also you have another layer to that, because you're still trying to help heal, because you know that healing has to happen so that it can be student centered or centered on somebody else besides just the teacher. So I absolutely think that what you do is amazing, and not everybody could do it. I'm very glad that Jed had you as part of this story. We're going to bring you back up. Is there anything you want to share a little bit before we bring up the next contributor?
I would say just get ready to be inspired. I think the collection that Jed put together, I find inspiring. And often, I haven't said this to him, but I have turned to it when I need that spark. And so I just want to say thank you in finding it encouraging myself. And so enjoy.
Well, that's so cool. That's so nice to hear. And we haven't really gotten a chance to talk about the project afterwards, because it's a project, not a product. And publishers don't like to hear that, but that's the truth. And it feels like it because it's still alive. Yeah. And Melody, you just said, the quote from Khalees where it's not about you. Well, the first time, and this was really the thing that was like, I have got to meet this lady, it was a virtual presentation to our staff. I don't remember if it was an opening day or what it was. But she just kind of had people in a virtual group, and she just said, "It's not about you, dear teacher." And the way that landed, I was like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. So.
That is a hard truth. That's a hard truth to hear, because we're right here in our cell. To get out of our own head, to get out of our own space is extremely difficult. I am so glad that you also said that you read it. I think that you don't have to read the book straight through to be inspired. Is there anybody's story in here that inspires you the most, or that inspires you more? I mean, I don't mean it to be a competition, but you know what I'm saying, that really gets to you.
Well, I will say the two guests you have tonight, Susan Cope, who I was making a connection earlier with her that I did experiential education, and how she reminds me that nature is a teacher, and that's inspiring. And then just hearing Frank's energy, how could you, just the vibration of his words helped keep me in.
Yeah, that's a good word for it
as well. And so I really think you can't go wrong with anyone in this text. I really
awesome. Do. All right. Well, we'll see you again soon if you stick around. Thank you so much for being part of this project.
Again, thanks for having me.
All right. So that was great. I love it. Our next guest is you know what I'm doing? I did it a little bit differently, but she did say a little bit about our next guest, Dr. Frank Rudnesky. He is also an author. And as I bring him up, Jed, do you mind also sharing, why did you want him to be part of the project?
Sure. I feel like I know Frank. I feel like I connect with Frank, but I've never met him in person. We've only talked like this, and we've had some really awesome conversations. Inevitably, I look in the background, and he's got a Yoda, and I'll pull out a lightsaber, and he talks about a magic trick, and here we go. And we connect on a lot of different levels, but most importantly, we connect about kids and teaching and learning. And Frank is. There's a group that meets on Fridays, kind of informally, formally scheduled in a place called the Innovators Lounge. It's a Codebreaker sponsored event. And that's where I've gotten to know Frank. And if you talk to him for a little bit, you're like, yep, we're connecting on a wavelength, and he speaks in a certain wavelength, and if it touches you, you know. And what I really was inspired by was kind of his background and his story, and having been a principal over the period of decades, and then but also having some time on the boardwalks of Jersey, and still at it. Still, you can see him coasting down the boards, but you can also see him inspiring middle schoolers to do wild things and make announcements, and then his Fridays, fired up Fridays. So yeah, get fired up. Here we go.
All right, Dr. Frank, tell us a little bit. And I'm so glad you're here, by the way. I just know you through Twitter, and your tweets are just energetic and fired up. They fire anybody up. I always feel like oh my gosh, I feel so honored that sometimes when you tweet or anything, it's wonderful. So tell us a little bit about like your portrait and this story, and what it meant for you.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me and including me in this podcast. And Jed, thank you for including me in the book. I was just having such a great time listening to that last conversation. I'm like, just take me out and give the other two guests some more time, because I'm inspired. So, my portrait is, I got a C in geometry in 10th grade. And, but the one thing I remember is that the shortest distance between any 2 points is a straight line. But you couldn't tell my geometry teacher that I remembered that, or even my school counselor, who said I would never nominate you for an award because you got a C. But I just look for like-minded people, and somehow I never would have met Jed if it wasn't for the pandemic. So there you go. So my portrait. Nothing in my life has been from point A to point B. My first career choice out of the University of San Francisco was magic. And how did I end up in San Francisco? Because I'm from New Jersey, and that's where I live right now, 3,010 miles away, which had to be removed from my environment. Started doing magic at Fisherman's Wharf because I needed money, food, and kind of became one of my passions. When and music is another one of my passions, and San Francisco is a great place for music. So my portrait isn't going to be a straight line, but I'll just throw this tidbit. One of the bands I was introduced to in San Francisco was the Grateful Dead. And I've been to 68 Grateful Dead shows before Jerry Garcia died in 1995. I don't count anything after that. But there's a billboard that used to be outside of an historic venue, Winterland in San Francisco, and it said, Grateful Dead, they're not the best at what they do. They're the only ones who do what they do. So when I found my way to education and I became passionate about that, I was always looking for those people that were not only passionate about education, but they did things that no one else did and perfected it for people like me that could replicate it and create this. Yeah, I want to be there. If you create a place people want to be, amazing things take place.
Right. So kids wanting to come to school. Yeah,
about that. It's a novel approach to education, to life, to anything, right? So had a magic shop on the boardwalk in New Jersey when I came back because it was fun and it made people smile. However, during the winter, the boardwalk was closed, and where I was in Wildwood, started substitute teaching, and I kind of said, wow, this is hard, but it's cool. And a principal at a school said, why don't you look into it? You have a way of connecting to the kids. So, wow, give me a little encouragement, unlike my school counselor.
Right.
who was by the way, was an identity thief, because the biggest form of identity theft is telling someone they can't accomplish something.
Right.
And so anyway, became a high school teacher eventually, and then decided I could make a bigger difference as an administrator. So that's what I did. I became an administrator. 1 year as a vice principal, then I became a middle school principal, and that was my jam. That was where nobody could beat me in basketball, not one eighth grader. So, hey, break up a fight, you could just go, wow, unlike high school. But we created this climate and culture, this thing that you only dream about or that other people perfected. And I found my way towards this climate and culture, this positive thing that increases performance in almost any organization. And wow, there were no fights. There were no there were no disagreements at a major level anymore. So instead of chasing after the kids doing the wrong thing, I was chasing after the kids doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Well,
I love that.
about that. How do you want to spend your time? Then I discovered that when I started working towards my doctorate, because I had now education is one of my passions. I have to keep learning, entered a doctorate program and had my first class that had the word leadership included in it. Think about that. Every job you've ever had leadership. You just didn't know it. And not only didn't you know it, but nobody told you about it and what it was. You had opportunities, maybe in student council or in sports or something else, but you never really learned about it. So when I discovered that, that I already had a lot of these qualities, and now I could formalize the instruction with contemporary authors like Stephen Covey and Seth Godin and a bunch of other people, like-minded people like that. I discovered that you could actually teach a 10-year-old, a fifth grader, how to be a leader. You could shift their paradigm into seeing not only who they are, but who they can become. And in the last segment, you were talking a little bit about diversity and inclusion and things. Now, when people start seeing, wow, there's somebody that looks like me, that's a principal. There's somebody that looks like me, that's a musician. There's somebody that looks like me, that's the president of the United States of America. I mean, like a couple presidents ago.
Yeah.
Not although I did do magic on Donald Trump's yacht. That's a story for another thing. But
Yes. Well, I want to say, Dr. Frank, that as ending the school year in a middle school, it really does take special people to lead middle school, to love middle schoolers. And I think that the kind of like the different directions that your life started out in, a magician, music, and like just looking at your background, all of these things really does, I think, prepare you to have that spirit to connect with middle schoolers. And it's not easy. And so, and I also love how you kind of found your leadership through even the opposite of what was shown to you as somebody in school. So I love that you shared that. And there's a lot of damage that the school system has put on to students and parents and everything. So you're undoing a lot of that damage, and I applaud you for that.
I like that you said it's not easy, because it isn't easy. But one of the themes throughout this book is folks who call it either their, like Frank said, it's one of his passions. It's not his passion, it's one of his passions. And that idea that he said that, people noticed early on that he has a way of connecting. Well, clearly that he's had a way of connecting forever, right? And that is one of those powers, but that's also one of his passions. When it's finding those like-minded people. And one of the things that you said, Frank, and I've heard you say it before, that I really like is a lot of people in our business, you hear about the paradigm shift, and it's a paradigm shift, and it's this, and they're talking about it as a noun. They're talking about it as an observation. You don't. You talk about shifting the paradigm. You talk about it as an action step. You talk about it as the calling and the work to do. And that's what's not easy. And that's what people aren't doing. And that's what leadership is all about, is empowering that shift. So thank you for doing it.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for bringing me in the conversation. This is you guys are amazing. This is wow, what a lineup. I can't wait till next week.
Yeah.
I know we should do this and get some more on, because there's 21 of them.
We could do it again. I want to ask you, though, I think I'm just going to ask everybody this. What do you consider yourself, a risk taker, rule breaker, or change maker?
Ooh, how about a mover, a shaker, and a difference maker?
Hey, there you go. I love it.
If you're gonna make me shoot, I think I would like to be. I think part of my legacy, I would like to be a change maker, but I'm a risk taker and a rule breaker, and that's probably part of my legacy to make change.
I love that we even talk about rule breaking, because I think in the education system, we are so used to being conforming to everything. So to break a rule, for me, that was really hard for me to get out of that mindset. So we will talk about more. Dr. Frank Rednusky, thank you so much. We're going to bring you back up in just a second. I'm so glad that you were part of this. Yes. Awesome. So I was going to have a question, and we're going to talk about that at the end. Like, how did the interview process change you? But I think I want to ask you that when everybody else comes up. We do have somebody. Somebody, Facebook user, is saying, love the questions and responses. Thank you, Facebook user, for joining us live. We appreciate
we hear you out there.
Yes. Our last guest, our contributor to your story, Impact to Influence. I don't know if she's your favorite. She might need to be your favorite. You have some history with her. Why don't you talk about that as I bring her up?
Well, yes. In about 2 weeks, I will have 51 years of history with her. Of all the different leaders and unique stories, she's the only one with a distinct advantage, disadvantage, or at least the distinct connection of having to be stuck with me as her little brother. So but that means I get to call her Susie. Everyone else has to call her Susan. So Susan Koch is our final contributor, guest of the night. But yes, she's my sister.
And so proud. Susan, when he talked about you coming on, he's like, she was Vermont State Teacher of the Year. He really is proud of you. And I just think that is wonderful, because I don't know if you guys had like a lot of sibling rivalry when you were younger, but to grow up and to be close and proud of your sibling is awesome.
And, that's only one of her recognitions from the presidential realm too. So she's too modest to talk about it, but you should. Don't be too modest. That's what this book is about.
Right. Well, thanks so much for inviting me. And when your little brother asks you if you want to be part of his project, of course you're delighted to participate. And so I have had some recognitions, and each one is really important, but it was very thrilling to participate in this project with my brother. And so recently I was able to go to Washington, D.C. just a year ago this time and receive the Presidential Award for science teaching for elementary students. And so that was really exciting. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And it's been really nice to have a platform of outdoor ed to really talk about that and receive awards in that realm.
Right. And it is different. And I told you before we started, like, in an interview question was, how would you incorporate outdoor education in a certain subject that I was interviewing for? But I want to know, how did you get started in outdoor education, and what does it mean to you now?
So I started, I think it's about 15 years ago now. And really, I had wiggly kindergartners in my classroom. They were really wiggly. And it was sort of that time when we started asking kindergarten kids really to do a lot more. And, it sort of went from a play-based philosophy to a more academic philosophy. And I felt like kids needed to get their hands dirty and to go outside more. So we started a program of taking kids outside to learn. And what I found is it's really been an amazing equalizer in a way. It's helping all the learners to be their best selves. And I just would love to share a story about today, because I had outdoor ed today with my class, if I may take
Yes, please.
I have a learner in my class this year who is nonverbal. He's on the autism spectrum, and he's slowly becoming more verbal, but he takes the identity of the northern cardinal. Each kid in the class takes a bird identity. And would you believe it? We saw a male and a female northern cardinal in the forest today, and I thought he was going to lose his mind, and he just became verbal. And he was like, northern cardinal, tree, northern cardinal. This is like, we have not heard him speak before. So it's just an example of sort of what can happen when you think about learning a little bit differently. And so it was super exciting for me and the other learners just to hear this little guy get so excited about the northern cardinal today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
What a
glad that you
story.
shared that. Yes. Oh my gosh.
I actually kind
Yeah.
of like forgot we were having this meeting tonight, and then when I got home, I was like,
Yes.
"Oh, I have something really cool to share tonight."
I know, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. I think that's probably right up there with the moments of receiving a presidential award. So
It
thank
is.
you for sharing.
It
And I
is.
love that for your student and his family and for your class. What would you, Susan, what do you classify yourself as, a risk taker, rule breaker, or change maker?
Well, I'm going to butt in because that's what brothers
Okay.
do, and say
Yes.
that I think when you hear some of these stories, if you get a chance to watch our YouTube conversation, but I'm going to make her talk about a little bit now of what it's like bringing first graders outside and lighting fires and dragging wood and all the. You would think it's crazy because there we are checking the thermometer to see if we can go outside, and there you are doing that. And now Melody's in Alaska, so that's a whole different category.
It gets
But
cold both places.
it does. Well, my point is, I think you've got to be a little bit of a risk taker to have the faith. But look what happens when you do. Look what happens when you create the space and time. You have those moments like today that you're not going to read that in any units of study. You're not going to find that in a trajectory or a shrink wrap curriculum on your desk. So you facilitated that moment today, which is really, I mean, that's again real magic. So just talk a little bit about just what outdoor ed looks like and your involvement, and because you are, like I said, you're humble, but you are instrumental in that coming to your school and your district and your whole area, in fact.
Yeah. So in our area, we really do have many schools using outdoor classrooms, and there is a little bit of a difference. In the pandemic, people were like literally like doing regular school, but moving it outside. And we're talking about sort of a different program where we're utilizing, like I said earlier, we're utilizing nature as a teaching partner. And so we actually, gear up. We head out for a day of learning. We eat today. We ate outside. And we usually have some, learning goals when we get outside. I was one of the small units that's mentioned in the book is this sort of sound waves unit that first graders do, and we like to make instruments out of ice. And so I was thinking Frank might like to come and help us with that sometime. But
Frank, are you kidding me? You wouldn't be getting him out of the forest. Frank would be out there making ice xylophones. I know you're out there, Frank.
And so, just sort of making ice drums, looking at videos, incorporating some technology, doing some recording, doing some sharing, watching videos of ice drumming in Russia, trying to emulate that, and really connecting to the standards in a totally different way. Right. And then coming back and sharing what we've been learning. I think that's a really big component if you're doing something innovative, is to share what you're doing. Yes. And make it really accessible for families, colleagues, admin. I love this. I love the Seesaw, the little learning tool where you can send messages back and forth and kids can share their learning. We're literally making videos of ice drums and sending them to families to show our learning about sound waves. So that's just one example of how we've sort of linked to the standards.
As a digital learning coach, that's music to my ears, because that's what you're doing. I mean, you're using tools to have parents, you're giving them a window, not just into your classroom, but as part of their day and part of your journey and part of their adventure. And you're keeping it, you're capturing it. Kids are reflecting on it. And like you said, nature can be an equalizer. Well, you're giving everyone a voice through nature's instruments, but then you're capturing it and sharing it too. And that's what this project is about, is not only just sharing it, but sharing what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think one of the sound bites one of my favorite sound bites of the whole book is, it's kind of a message to administrators who might ask, how is this time on task? And I like how you said it, which is just, it is time on task. It's just a different task. And it takes some guts to say that.
Yeah, for sure.
And ultimately, we really want to create people that want to protect the earth, that are earth stewards ultimately. And you can't protect something unless you love something. So I feel like there's kind of a common thread in here about love, about collaborating, and about really, helping our kids become the best people they can be.
For sure. For sure. I love that. And on that note, are you okay if I bring Dr. Khalees and Dr. Frank back up? All right.
Let's get them together.
All right.
And in person.
I love that you guys are here. I'm going to bring us a little bit closer. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit each about your portraits. Something that I really want to ask you, besides, are you a risk taker, rule breaker, change maker? I thought that was a really good question, by the way, Jed. So good for you. But how did this whole process, Jed, for you putting it together, but also for y'all as for being contributors, how did this change you? Anybody can go first.
I'll go first. It changed me because I thought I was writing a book, and then I realized I wasn't creating a product. And for me, it was so fun just to capture these stories, and it really wasn't producing a product. It was a project for me that has not ended. In fact, this is the best part of it, and this was not a planned part when I thought about collecting stories, but I collected them, but something was missing. And what was missing was connecting these people. Like, who I want us to get together. We would have such an awesome time. We wouldn't shut up. But we would learn so much from each other. And I could just imagine Frank up in the woods. But for me, it changed me because it gave me a way. This is my way of thanking people who have been really important to me. And it was a lot more than just sending them a book. It was really about capturing their stories. And honestly, they needed to tell stories in their own voice. And what was interesting in the interviews is sometimes people would slip into really familiar things they've said a lot in stages, in PD workshops. And I was like, I've heard that before. I know that. I want to know about you. And I wanted to really hear those questions. Really just, how'd you do it? Because we're all on a step of our journey to whatever's next, right? And seeing how different people have done it with and without leaving classrooms, with and without leaving school, and finding what leadership means to them, because it's not just, the traditional admin ladder. For me, it was a real learning process, and that's how I was changed, was what I've learned and continue to learn by developing these relationships and connections too.
It's beautiful. Would anybody else like to share? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit. I think one of the things that changed in me after participating in this project was the fact that there are people who are hopeful and optimistic in the field of education. It's been a bit of a rough road in the classroom lately, and I have colleagues and administrators who are kind of down, and so this has been a real positive view, and it's been a really nice way to encourage people who are down, to think about paths that might work better for them, or if they are going to stay in the classroom, things that'll work to make it more pleasant for them. So it's just was a refreshing project to be a part of, and I really appreciate being included.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it reminded me of the interconnectedness of humanity and the power of stories. Right. And that's why I still turn to the book, right? I turn to it when I need that vibration, when I need that pick me up, when I need to be reminded that love and education does make the difference. It's just, it reminded me the power. It reminds me even to this day, the power of stories and the interconnectedness of us all.
I love that. I really do love the interconnectedness. That is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially after moving to Alaska and feeling disconnected from so many people that, I normally with. That's so important. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
One thing that was really interesting was I thought I knew what I was going to be asking. I thought I knew what I was going to be hearing. And in every interview, I was surprised by what I learned. And it taught me, because I haven't done a podcast, I haven't done interviews before. I've just had really cool conversations, but it taught me to shut up and listen. It taught me to hear what people were saying and be able to engage with what I was hearing, to ask questions that were meaningful, and to remind myself that I whether it was implicit bias or whether it was just a presumption of something. A simple example is Peter and Paul Reynolds. And everyone knows who Peter and Paul Reynolds are, hopefully. But I kind of went in thinking that, okay, no wonder they've done these really cool and amazing things. They've had this built-in partner since they were born. They're identical twins. And I kind of said, has it been this unfair advantage that you two have these partners in each other? And it didn't occur to me that as an identical twin, they had to learn a lot earlier than we all did what it means to differentiate yourself, what it means to be an individual, what it is to find out who you are and establish who you are. And they had to do that earlier than most because, for their friends just called them twin. And for me, that was it was a real shock. And it was kind of a simple thing, but also a really profound thing too, to make me listen and just think about, back up and even put my questions aside sometimes and just kind of hear what I was hearing and go with that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're in this field long enough, you wonder, number one, if you're crazy.
I can answer that, Frank. I can
All the
answer that.
time. All the time.
And number two, is it worth it? And then now you have a collection of people, and you read their snippet, and then you hear them and see them, and sometimes you say, you know what, that person's nothing like I thought they would be when I hear them. And other times you say, that's exactly how I thought that person would sound. And you realize that, yeah, you're crazy, but everyone else is too. So it's okay. And that, is it worth it? It's worth it. It has to be worth it because it's the future.
Right. And are you crazy?
I am, yes. And that was before
Guilty.
I heard, and that was before the pandemic, before I knew what SEL was.
Right. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And so we're getting closer to the end, but, and I know that we kind of answered this, but I feel like since we have a lot of people's attention right now, what is something, and it can be about what you had in your portrait or just something that's on your heart or in your mind right now. What is the message you want to share with educators today?
I'm going to go last because that's a great way to share this short little video because that's my message.
You're
so
such
I'll
a
go
good
last.
marketer. Look at you, Jen. Marketing.
No, it's not a commercial. Like I said, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to have it come from my mouth.
For me, that's an easy question, right? And it's what I think about all the time. I always say love and education. If I can learn to love harder and if I can educate more and be educated more. But I think if I could buy the world a t-shirt, it would say pause and get curious. If you could just stop and get curious about something. And then on the back, I would say, listen twice. Listen twice. If you could just pause and get curious and listen twice, we'd be in a different place. That for me is everything.
I have to write that down. That's really great.
I want to see that t-shirt. Go for it.
That's a really good t-shirt.
I will have it on my website by the end of the night. I promise.
I love it. Pause and get curious. Times two. Yeah.
I think in that love and leadership are a lot alike, and without love, there is no leadership. And if you treat love and leadership like verbs instead of just nouns and feelings, then amazing things start happening.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm out. You guys are amazing too. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you're here. It's good to put faces to people that you've followed for a long time, and just the energy that you can read into text, but like I feel like I'm always associating with the flame, obviously fire. So it is really great that you're here. I'm glad you're here.
Honored.
I've been thinking about my t-shirt message as well. And I like it to say, get out.
Get out of here. I love it.
And I'd like to, that's my message for educators is get out and help them love being out and help them love nature so that they can become stewards of the earth. I know it sounds lofty, but I really do believe that they are the ones who are going to help us with that dilemma.
For sure.
It does
and
not
I think
sound lofty. Think of your
it
story
doesn't.
from today. If you said if you put that as your professional learning goal for this year, you're going to have a moment with a nonverbal student where he's going to profess. I mean, that would be a lofty goal, but you didn't have to make it a goal, and still you made it happen.
And, they say that nature is healing, and, your story illustrates that so perfectly, but it was something that we talked about too at that interview that I told you about, like being in Alaska, the winter especially was so long this year. We had snow from September to May. And so I'm not a big snow person. People think I'm crazy that I moved here because they know that I would prefer to live in a desert. But if you don't get outside, you get bottled up. It hurts you mentally and health wise as well. So I think that get out. Yes, get out. So
love it. Sure. That's a motto. That's your tagline. And Khalees, make sure that on your t-shirt you do write KW Diversity Training, the name of, is that what it's called? KW Diversity Group? I want to make sure that's there. And Frank, follow him. And you said, you talked about his fire. Frank's power is not just the fire, but it's about before you can stoke that fire, you got to build that fire. And that's what his work is all about. We all talk about that, right? That work, but how do you actually get that spark? How do you ignite it? That's the work he's been doing. So is it okay if I try to present this? All right.
Just you hit the share button and I will take the banner off. And while we're waiting, you guys, it's been such an honor to have all of you on my broadcast tonight. I appreciate the work and the heart that you put into your portraits and that you do daily. It's not just a chapter in a book. It is literally something that you put to life every single day. And that's what makes impacts, the ripples that we all need. And so I feel honored just to be connected with each of you. So, and from here on, we are friends, okay? Yes. If you are in Alaska, mi casa es su casa, okay?
There we go. All right, I'm going to press play and we'll come back together. Let me know if the sound doesn't.
Yes. And let me, everything you can see.
You're looking at the book cover right now?
Yes.
And be brave. The thing is there's so many things that I didn't know I could do until I decided to do it.
We don't want to be the subjects or objects of reform. We want to be the architects of reform.
It's really about how can I connect, right, what I'm individually perceiving, right, as a teacher, as a person in this community, to those broader societal, sociological understanding of what I know to be true in the education space.
Then what we're saying is there is more knowledge amongst a group than in any one person.
I think to make a change to the world or make a change to someone's life is more important than to just say, I'm a rule breaker.
You have to take that risk, right? You could still teach, but the minute you put one foot out of the classroom, so much opportunity happens. But you have to remember your number one responsibility is in that classroom.
It was probably the hardest I've ever worked in my life, but it was like the most exciting time in my life.
Before I said, stop going and looking at the templates, stop looking at the colors, stop looking at the fonts. Let's talk about the story. Let's talk about what you're trying to tell.
But create that window into your classroom. Those that choose to be isolated are doing so by choice.
But I have to think about why I'm out there and how I'm giving up, sort of valuable teaching time or time on task. This is time on task. It's just a different kind of task.
Story is really a key way that we connect with people and share big ideas.
When you see the people around you smile and they are taken to places they never thought possible.
What makes me unique? What makes Paul unique? That's really foundational to all of our work is, how is Jed a unique human being? What is the Jed story? And there's only one Jed story. And if you had an identical twin, you still would have just one Jed story.
This is not a bureaucratic approach. It is what I like to call a loose hierarchies where it is driven from the bottom up.
To have lasting change and to have other people pick up on that and carry it forward is the biggest gift I think you can get.
That's where my why came into play. The idea of improving the experience for everyone involved. I can't do that from a classroom. I can do that from an assistant principal position, sure, but I can do that even more from a principal position.
But it was really great to know that the people who were leading my school thought that I had potential to be a leader myself.
In building Aussie Ed, I was able to rebuild me and give me identity and purpose. And that's it. When we understand our purpose, then we can, we can have a focus and everything else starts to make a little bit more sense.
And sometimes all we need to do is be in the same space, and there's something about the energy that transcends one another, and we're connected in heart and mind around what I feel like is the right stuff.
What a long, strange trip it's been.
Yeah, of course, I had to finish with that one. Now,
For sure.
you may notice, but I stopped sharing. Here we go.
Yes.
You may notice I actually do own 20 different shirts, and but you also might notice I was in the throes of COVID during one of those interviews. The book was finished, my collections were done, and then I was introduced to the big koala himself, Brett Salakis from Australia, in one of our Friday meetings, and I just emailed him like, "Can I interview you today?" Because I was so amazed by his story, and if you watch it, you'll be blown away. But because he's in Australia, it was the middle of the night that I had to hop on, and I had COVID, so I looked like a total disaster. But I've just realized that when I saw myself there looking miserable. But
we are harder on ourselves than other people are. I didn't
Yes.
notice that, so I didn't even
good.
notice that. Yes.
It's a great story anyway. But it's, for me, that says it all. It's like, I don't need to talk about the book. I just show that, and it explains exactly why I captured these people. I connected these people, but I captured their voices anyway, because that's what it's all about. And most of them are just too humble to talk about themselves. So I tricked them into doing it.
And it's a great collection of people. I saw people that I love on there. So I'm so glad that you created or you started this project, and I know that it's going to keep going. We are closing for the night, but before we jump off, if there's any last words that you want to share, I want to give you that opportunity before we say goodbye.
I just want to thank everyone for especially the three of you, Susie, Frank, Khalees. You can call her Susan, I can call her Susie. And Melody especially, for bringing us together and having a place to do it, because we don't get a chance. We've never gotten a chance to get together. But listen twice, get out, get fired up. The words that you've heard of our guests tonight, do it, because they're showing what happens if you do, right? It's all about taking action. It's all about taking that impact and then turning it into influence. Har, har, har.
No, I love it. And it's real. And you guys are doing this with your lives. You're not just talking about it or writing about it. You're doing the work every single day. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you, everybody who, did somebody want to say something? Oh, okay. I want to thank everybody who watched either this live or is watching the replay. We appreciate you so much. And I also want to thank our sponsors, SpacesEDU, one more time. And when we talk about, capturing and curating learning, watching students grow over time, it is a wonderful digital portfolio platform for you to use. So thank you to our sponsors. Y'all don't go away. I'm going to put the outro on, but stick around. I want to talk to you before you jump off. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.